Thank you.
We're live now, Leader.
Good. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Cabinet meeting on the 20th of December. We have a fairly intense agenda. However, I must announce at this point that I'm deferring item 5 on the agenda, the Cacao Area Review paper, to the meeting of the next Cabinet, which is on the 17th of January next year. Due to the fact we have some fresh information that's come into the council, which we wish to consider before presenting the paper to Cabinet. But the matter will be dealt with on the 17th of January. And I, as chair, will not be accepting any further delay in resolving that issue. Good. So let's make a start on the agenda. Do we please have any apologies for absence?
I've not received any, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 8 on our pack. Could members will have had a chance to see those minutes? Can I have a proposer, unless there are issues arising from the minutes that members want to raise? I have no hands. Could I have a proposer, please, for those minutes?
Yeah, Councillor Jackie Charlton.
I'm happy to second those. I haven't got a hand in the system, just to I don't know whether anyone else has. I need to rejoin, but I can't use a mechanical hand or electric hand.
Leader,
Okay.
there's no hands up facility on Teams Live, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Right. So, but members, you'll have to raise your hand if you wish to speak, because if there's no hand in the box. Thank you. Thanks for that guidance, Steve. I don't think members realised that. I certainly didn't. Okay. Could I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour of accepting the minutes of the previous meeting. Thank you very much. I think that's unanimous. So those minutes are approved. Thank you. We move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on items on the agenda that members wish to declare at this point? You can always declare at the time if you see something you think you should declare about. I have none. Thank you.
Leader, we have Councillor Jake.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry,
Yeah.
Without the hands, it's slightly tricky.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sure it is a declaration of interest, but it's certainly it's not personal or financial. It's simply that I'm predetermined on the item on the agenda concerning Dolly School, but I would still I just want to make a comment at the start of that, if I may, but I realise I'll have to leave the meeting. I'm predetermined, if people don't know, because I've fully supported the campaign regarding Dolly.
Clive, Monitoring Officer, can I have some guidance? Is it in order that Councillor Jake Berman speaks on this issue?
He can speak on the issue. He's declared his interest, but he can't vote.
Fine, thank you. Okay, Jake, I'll bring you in at the start of the debate, if that's okay. Good. Okay, let's move on. So we move to item 4, the very item.
Leader.
Sorry, Caroline, my apologies. You wish to say something, but before we get into the agenda proper, my apologies.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. I thought it'd be useful just to update members on a few current issues before we go into the agenda itself. We're aware that there have been issues with water supplies in the Llandrindod and the Radnshire area since yesterday. Officers had an urgent meeting with Welsh Water last night. We understand that it will take time to resolve all of the current issues, possibly up to 48 hours. These issues have been caused by last week's cold weather and the rapid thaw over the past 2 days. Information and updates are available on Welsh Water's website, and we will be sharing those messages on the council's website and social media as they are issued until the problems have been resolved. All of our services are actively working with and assisting Welsh Water as they address these issues, including highways, education service and social services. Our focus will be on supporting any vulnerable residents impacted by these supply issues. I would also like to mention the increasing pressures and challenges within the health and social care sector. Increased demand across the sector due to strep A, COVID, winter pressures and industrial action are all contributing to high levels of service requests. We have invoked the business continuity plan for adult services last week as a preventative measure. High demand for adult social care, combined with recruitment and retention issues and increasing level of sickness in key areas, is impacting on service delivery. The service will now stand down non-critical work so that it can redeploy current staff to meet business critical activities. Daily meetings have been set up where senior leaders within adult services can monitor the situation and take appropriate action to ensure business critical services are maintained. The council will continue to prioritise those adults who need vital social services as a matter of urgency. Anyone with any safeguarding concerns needs to contact the council, and contact details are available on our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive, and my apologies for not being here sooner. And my apologies also for my image disappearing, which may be a relief to some. But having slight connection problems here, so I think it might be better if I have the camera off. It might improve matters for the time being. OK, let's move on the agenda to item 4, Welsh Medium Provision in Dolly, in the name of Councillor Pete Roberts. Pete, please, pages 9 to 64 in our pack.
Thank you, Leader. This is the report returning from the decision taken by Cabinet in July to explore the potential viability of establishing a Welsh medium primary school on the site of the current Llanfihangel County Primary School building in Dolai. The report steps through the processes that have taken place since the last meeting, outlines the background to the survey that was undertaken, and gives you details on the comments made. I'm now going to pass you across to Marianne, who will be taking you through the technical aspects of this paper.
Okay, diolch yn fawr. Okay. Yes, so papers in front of you today around Welsh medium provision in Dolai, and we were requested as officers to consider whether it would be viable to establish Welsh medium provision in Dolai. So we have within your suite of papers the covering paper plus 3 appendices. So one is the report considering the viability. The second is the questionnaire, it's the outcome of the engagement, and then also Appendix C, where you'll find comments from the Council's Welsh Medium Education Forum, which met last week to discuss the findings. So the methodology we took here, there are two aspects to this report. One is the development of an option appraisal to consider various options about how we could establish Welsh Medium in the area. And you'll see from this that we follow a specific approach towards assessing options, which you'll be very familiar with in terms of other school transformation work. We also sent a questionnaire out to parents in the Llandrindod and Prestine and Eighton areas. So this engagement started on the 29th of September and ran till the 10th of November. Target audience was parents and prospective parents in the Dolai, Prestine, Llandrindod and Eighton areas. Also Glade Street, Radnor Valley, Knighton, Newbridge, Tribonnen, Cemllys, Trader, Llanbista and Crossgates as well. So we received 224 responses to the questionnaire and 4 written responses, and also the questionnaire was published via social media and the press, so it was open to the public as well. And from that engagement, you'll see within the report that the question was asked: if the council were to establish Welsh medium provision in Dolai, would your children be interested in attending? The response was 98 responses, so 43% indicating that they would be, in 90 responses, or 40% indicating that they wouldn't be interested in attending. 27 replied with don't know, so that's 12%, and 9 didn't answer that particular question, which is 4%. And then questions were asked, as you can see throughout the report. There were various options put forward, 2 options, and significantly more in favour of the option of phasing the provision in Llanfihangel Rhydyton School rather than closing the school and opening a brand new Welsh medium provision there. So that gives you a flavour of the engagement. You'll see from the various comments made, there's comments in favour of, comments or concerns around developing in the area. So it gives you a very varied sort of summary of the responses received. So that was the engagement piece. The second piece of work was then the option appraisal, which you can read within the appendix there. This we looked at what options were possible to develop Welsh medium. So we had 3 original options. First was to change the language category of Llanfihangel Rhydyton from English medium to Welsh medium on a phased basis. So starting pupils in the early years and phasing in each year as these pupils move through the school. Slightly different option then, option 2, was to establish a new Welsh medium school on the current site of Llanfihangel Rhydyton School, which would mean that Llanfihangel Rhydyton School would close and we'd open a new Welsh medium school starting with the foundation phase and extending the provision as these pupils move to the school. So the school would open with a reception class of a very small amount of pupils. And then the third option was to establish a Welsh medium stream at Llanfihangel Rhydyton CP School to operate alongside English medium provision, so what we call a dual stream school. We assessed these options then against a number of critical success factors, but option 3, which is a dual stream option, was discounted because it would be a very small stream within a very small school, so we didn't feel that that was viable in the first instance. And it's important to note that whilst options 1 and 2 failed to meet any of the critical success factors, the assessment identified that there was a possibility that they could meet some of them, so we needed to go forward and explore these and assess them further. So we have a SWOT assessment and then a financial evaluation. Before I go into the financial evaluation, I'm going to call Jane in because we just sent you revised figures, which Jane will explain. But before we go into the finances, I am going to jump to the advice section in the papers, and we need to be very clear here. So based on the findings of the report to assess the viability of establishing Welsh medium in Dorlai and the findings of the questionnaire, our advice as officers is clear, and that establishing Welsh medium provision in Dorlai is not viable. There are a number of reasons for this, and I will read these out. The reasons are that establishing Welsh medium provision in Dorlai would not meet our aspiration as a council, which is outlined in the council's WESP, Welsh Education Strategic Plan, which is to develop new Welsh medium provision in Powis's main centres of population in order to stimulate demand. We come back time and time again to the fact when developing Welsh medium provision, not only in Powys but across Wales, the tendency is to develop in areas where we can have a critical mass. We can then guarantee the growth. We were also concerned that the capacity of the current building, which currently it has a capacity of 36 pupil places, means that the school would continue to be a small school with no ability to grow its numbers without additional capital investment to either reconfigure the school or add an extension, etc. There is a cost to developing Welsh medium provision. We know this, but the cost here is quite significant compared to the status quo. We're also concerned that the school would continue to have low pupil numbers, high budget share per pupil, and that teaching would continue to take place in combined age groups due to the low pupil numbers. We are also concerned that attracting and recruiting staff who have a proficiency to teach in Welsh may be difficult, and this is based on our knowledge and evidence from other schools across the county. It is not easy to recruit Welsh medium staff across, anywhere across the county. But also, high quality Welsh medium provision is available locally at both Ysgol Trefonen and Rhaeadr Trinity Wales Primary School, with places available at both these schools. And also, any parent wishing their child to access Welsh medium provision would be granted free school transport to the closest provider in accordance with the homeschool transport policy. So, it is therefore advised that the Council does not proceed with establishing Welsh medium provision in Dorlai. This would then mean that Llan Fihangel Rhydaethon CP School would close on the 31st of August 2023. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to ask Jane to come in. If Jane, do you want to come in on the finances and the new information just circulated?
Thank you,
Thank you,
Marianne.
Jane.
Thank you. Just to update Cabinet, so you're clear in terms of the financial consequences of the decision before you today. The table that you see in section 2.8, which clearly demonstrates in terms of the cost of each of the options. We have phased out the English medium provision a year earlier than we should have in that table. So when we amend that table, what it actually does is increase the differential of the options. So it makes option 1 and option 2 more expensive than you see in the tables there, and basically increases the difference from the status quo in terms of closure of the school. So we will amend the table when the report is published. I need to make you aware of that, but it does not change anything in terms of what Marianne has outlined and the decision before you today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, members, over to you. I remember you can't put your hands up on the screen. You have to put your hands up physically. Anybody? Jake, so you wish to make a statement before you withdraw from the debate? Thank you.
Yes, I do, and I'm not intending to go into details. I've got two very capable local members representing the views of Dorlai, and possibly providing challenge where they feel that's appropriate. But I just wanted to question, if I might, the recommendations that we have before us today and the decision that we're being asked to make. So last night, I would have asked this before, but I saw the legal advice which was circulated in respect of the scope of decision making that we have in front of us. And if we look at the recommendations, we have two. First of which is to note the officer advice that Marianne Evans has very carefully put before us, and which is set out in the paper. So we're asked to note that, and the officer's view is clear, as we've heard that there, that we shouldn't establish the Welsh medium provision in Dorlai as it's not viable. And the second is to implement the decision made by the previous cabinet to close the school, and there's a date given to that, and part of the reasoned legal justification is set out there. But it does leave the question in my mind, the scope with which Cabinet is at liberty to actually reach a different decision to the one that Cabinet made previously, and the degree to which we are actually simply bound by that decision. Now, if I can just peel back this, give me forbearance at a moment. The idea of the Welsh option came out of a scrutiny conversation, which was put to Cabinet and set aside by them when they decided to close. Scrutiny raised that point on the basis that it felt that all viable options were not being raised, and therefore the rural school codes wasn't adhered to. Of course, Cabinet went ahead and made that decision, and then was bound to delay implementation to await the judicial review, just as we're having to do now, which set that back. in the meantime, we've sought to more thoroughly investigate that option, and the officers have done the work that has been described here, and it's reported back. But now when I read the recommendations about what we're actually being asked to do, it is to note that piece of work, no more or no less than that, and then to implement the decision. Now, actually, I don't think it falls to us to implement the decision, and this is where I'd like some legal clarity, because I think the decision is already set out and established, as you can see there, and unless there is a legal basis that it would be found to be inappropriate altogether or altogether inappropriate for us to do that, and there's no apparent basis for that, then we are simply bound by that decision. So I'm wondering, you know, we're fretting over this, but I'm wondering what decision we actually make. And actually that to implement, I don't think implementation is in our gift. I think it simply follows as a matter of course the decision. So a long way around to saying is I'm not certain what decision we're actually entitled to make that is different from that which the previous cabinet took. They took the money out of the budget. That's gone, making the comparisons now far more expensive. So to all intents and purposes, this school is already closed and simply is being propped up by using reserves to keep it going whilst the judicial review and this piece of work is done. So I'd like some clarification on that. Obviously, I won't be here when the decisions are made against these recommendations, Chair, but I just wanted some clarification because I think there's some confusion about what scope we actually have as a cabinet to make fresh decisions today. And I frankly don't see we have any opportunity to do so because I think this is, as has been said, a done deal back in February. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Right, so Councillor Berryman has raised a legal point, really, about the scope of the Cabinet's decision-making powers. Clive, Monitoring Officer, can you help us?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Jake. I hope I can clarify, for the sake of Councillor Jake and others, the situation is that when this administration came into being, they made a decision to delay implementation of the decision, and because that cabinet made a decision to delay in implementation, it was felt appropriate that this cabinet makes a decision to actually proceed with the implementation. I do understand Councillor Jake's point, but of course the reason why this cabinet previously had agreed to delay implementation was to see if there were any changes in circumstances with regard to the opportunity of introducing a Welsh medium school on that site, and that's the reason why this recommendation is worded in that way. It's simply to record the fact that this administration had previously decided to delay implementation, and now it's being asked to indicate and make it clear that implementation will proceed.
Jake, are you? I'm going to allow you to come back once, but then I think
I don't think the word is for us to implement, because I don't think we are. I mean, we can take off finger off pause, we can do a number of things, but actually I think the implementation is set in train, given the legalities of what's set out. And I'm not a legal expert in education matters, but I take the point. We decided to pause to investigate. We've investigated, had that back, and actually at that point, I don't think there's any more decision for us to make, because that process simply carries on. Our delay evaporates and it carries on, but it's probably a moot point, Chair, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Now, I have a number of members wishing to speak on this from outside the Cabinet. I think I'm not quite sure. I'm in their hands. Would you rather speak after Cabinet have had its debate before we take the vote, or before?
Leader, can I suggest that we invite other members to speak to start with, so that members of Cabinet can reflect upon what they've heard?
Okay, that's good advice. So I have a list starting with local member Councillor Deb Edwards, please. Deb, can you hear us? Yes.
Yeah, I've just switched you on. I thank the chair for granting me the opportunity to speak today and bring the views of the area that I'm lucky enough to represent to Cabinet. It's been a tough, long-running fight. To condense into 5 minutes is almost impossible. I will not dwell on the past administration's actions, as I'm here in front of the current administration, you, the Cabinet. Llanfiangor Ydaethon Community Primary School, community in the title, and the school very much at its proud, strong beating heart. In July this year, a little bit of light was cast into the dark days in the form of looking at Welsh medium being viable here at our school. We embrace this and relish the opportunity to look to the future, be a stepping stone for the Welsh language in a traditional English-speaking stronghold of East Radnorshire. We knew, given the demographic and geographical layout of this area, we had a real chance to prove our viability. Central location in the catchment area within our rural district, giving easy access to Welsh medium school from the Eiton valleys to the larger towns of Knighton and Preston, which straddle the English border. To encourage our children, the future workforce of Powys, to stay in the area and gain employment and be bilingual in authorities such as here at Powys County Council, or even in the future sit in the chamber and be able to understand fellow members when they speak, and not now when the majority of us stretch for the headphones. Llanfiangor Ydaethon school building is a category B, apparently better than any newer building schools within the county. And the figures at the time, which I knew, when broken down, for the cost of education is £4,000 per pupil. Is this not the current average for the county? There is currently room for expansion at the site within the existing structure with no extra cost. The community have already made huge personal investments into our school, and I believe in future, both physically, emotionally and financially will do. Police are currently at maximum capacity, are our limited times that children can attend and have a waiting list. A large percentage of answers on the questionnaire were in favour of Welsh medium school at Llanfiangor Ydaethon, not an appetite for learning elsewhere, but here at Llanfiangor Ydaethon. I am therefore very disappointed in the recommendations from Powys County Council's Welsh Medium Education Forum, WESP, claiming that Llanfiangor Ydaethon does not fit into their vision or location of future Welsh medium education in Powys. Is this that then must rule out huge swathes of the county? Are they only looking at larger populated areas to facilitate and teach learners? Maybe this is where there is a massive decline, why there is a massive decline in national language of Wales within Powys. Possibly a correction in vision may be the way forward. Small pebbles thrown into water cause as many ripples as larger stones. Although the communication has been difficult in the last few days due to the timing of this meeting, as the Senate's Christmas break started last week, the Chair of Governors at Llanfiangor Ydaethon's most recent communication with the Minister of Education and the Welsh Language, Jeremy Miles, suggests that there is no such thing as a non-viable Welsh medium school. I ask you respectfully to consider that due to the recent national statistics of 25% drop of spoken Welsh in Powys, you have the opportunity, a school and its community, willing right in the heart of an English-speaking area, to ignite the spoken Welsh language. With the recommendation in front of you, is there really a Welsh medium school that is not viable in Powys? Rydym Llanfiangor Ydaethon, rydym yn falch. Diolch, thank you.
Thank you, Deb, for your contribution out here, and I'm sure members are taking what you said very seriously indeed. Can I bring Councillor Elwyn Vaughan in, please, the chair of the Welsh Medium Forum? And my apologies, Elwyn, that we don't have translation today.
Fine, thank you very much. Diolch, Arweinydd. Yeah, this is a slightly unusual situation I find myself in, to be honest with you. For those of you that don't know, the WESP partnership is a partnership made of a range of organisations, some internal officers assisting, but in the main external organisations such as HAG, Mudiad Meithrin and others who have a range of expertise in this field over a number of years. And obviously, like myself, are people who have been campaigning for Welsh medium education and other aspects for a long time. and therefore looked at this in great detail. And the first thing to note is the welcome to support shown by parents and genuine interest by families in learning Welsh. I think that's a positive thing and a change in itself worth noting. However, for the partnership, the factors to consider how it relates to the strategy which has been approved by previous and current cabinets and by Welsh Government ministers. Things such as sustainability of the provision and development, not just in the short term, but in the longer term. And also there were questions raised about potential effect on Trefornen and Rhaeadr's current provision and the sustainability of those sites. Now in the West, it does say there needs to be a looking within the 10-year plan of provision in East Radnorshire, and Prestine or Knighton are favoured options in that. There's also concern about the whole fundamental question of follow-on into secondary education, because that's where we lose a lot of young people in the current system. And as you can see in the report, therefore, the conclusion of the partnership, after careful consideration, is that in many ways it would be better to support families and understanding and encouraging them to participate in Welsh medium education in using Trefornen in particular, but also in facilitating trochi. Trochi is immersion facilities. We have piloted aspects in Powys in recent times, but using that to enable our young people to access Trefornen and Rhaeadr in particular. As I said, I have been campaigning on these issues for over 30 years. It is a passion of mine, as many of you will know. But I think that strategic approach and some of the issues that were carefully considered by the partnership need to be noted, and that fact that the people who make these comments do know what they're talking about. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anna Davis, please.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to speak at this cabinet meeting. Just to start, I'm quite shocked that the monitoring officer allowed Councillor Jake Berryman to say what he did to influence the discussion when he had clearly stated he's got interests in this issue. But I'll leave that for others to decide what to do, because I don't think it was appropriate. But Leader, here we go again. Much of my initial comments also apply to Llanbedr Church in Wales School. Your cabinet, James, has put the two school communities through the emotional turmoil. School closure is a really difficult decision, and closing of Dolai School was one of the hardest of those decisions that the last cabinet took because of the nature of the farming community and the huge area that the school was served. But to make it perfectly clear, the cabinet had the option to halt the process in July. They could have halted it. Doesn't matter what Jake Berryman says, the cabinet could have halted this closure process in July. And I hope the monitoring officer will make that clear at the end of what I've got to say. Throughout this, the Liberal Democrats have not served their community well. An extensive consultation process is always undertaken before any closure, but you have tried to undermine it at every stage. Last January, you brought a motion to Council to try and halt school transformation, but in July, you accepted that transformation was the right thing to do. In your election campaign back in the spring, you said you would fight to keep rural schools open, but in July, once in power, you decided not to stop the closure, which was perfectly within your gift to do so. In that election campaign, you encouraged communities to take the decision to go for judicial review, even offering to sell a house to help fund that court action. But that expensive court battle was thrown out by the judges, and they came down very clearly on the side of council officers that the process was fair. The council alone the cost to the council alone has been over £50,000 in legal fees. I have no idea what it cost an officer time. I dread to think what the financial costs to the communities are, and the emotional costs are impossible to calculate. This is if there is money remaining from the sale of the house, are the Liberal Democrats going to reimburse the council the £50,000? Back to the Dolau itself. On pages 34, 35 of that consultation, it is very clear. There were 3 options there, not one tick, a row of zeros of positive outcomes, 0, 0, 0. I have to question the judgment of the Cabinet Member for Education to bring such a proposal forward. I have never seen a option appraisal come forward to Cabinet with a row of zeros. It is quite astonishing. The option, to be honest, hand on heart, was never viable. If Dolau cannot support an English medium school, how on earth is it going to produce a Welsh medium school without busing children over from the border towns into Dolau? And in the consultation, I did not see many parents offering their children to be put on buses and transported across the hills to Dolau. To be honest, this option was the option of it saddens me to say, but the option of a Welsh medium school in Dolau was never feasible. And it, as Marianne said, she probably didn't use these very words, but it drives a coach and horses through your own policy, your West policy. And I would like to hear what Sandra and Susan have to say on that as well, as they have responsibility for the Welsh language. And I do not know, maybe finance officers can tell, but what has been additional spend on maintenance during this period of delay? There are so many questions to ask about the conduct of the Cabinet here going forward. And I understand you've pulled the Llanbedr report, which is quite shocking. There were a couple of members of the Liberal of the scrutiny committees that sat last Wednesday, which should not have been on that committee. It was legally breaking legal rules. Apologies. I'll stop there, but there were many questions to ask how the Liberal Democrats have conducted themselves in this process. Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Sorry for being so negative, but this really is an important issue here. Thank you.
Before I bring the other speakers in, I just monitoring off that Councillor Davis has asked 2 questions really on the issue of allowing Councillor Jake Berman to speak at the start of the meeting, which I did check from the chair was okay, and you seem to indicate that it was. And secondly, on the legal position of the Cabinet in terms of stopping the implementation back in July, I think is what Councillor Davis was saying, which is his interpretation of things is not as how it was presented to us as Cabinet members at the time. Could you please clarify those 2 issues, please?
Thank you, Leader. Insofar as Councillor Jake is concerned, I think he indicated at the start of his speech to Cabinet that he did not consider himself to have a personal or prejudicial interest, but he accepted that he was predetermined with regard to the outcome. And it's for that reason that I advised that he could speak, but he could not vote. Hope that deals with it. I see Councillor Ali shaking his head, but that's what I consider to be the position. Insofar as Section 55 of the School Standards and Organisation Wales Act 2013 is concerned, subsection 2 of that section, so that's 55.2, says that the proposals must be implemented in the form in which they were proposed, unless the implementation would be unreasonably difficult, or the circumstances are so altered that the proposals were approved as approved, that the implementation of those proposals would be inappropriate, and the organisation code indicates that inappropriate means inappropriate altogether, so altogether inappropriate. So what Leader, your cabinet did in July was to see whether or not there were a change of circumstances, namely whether or not a Welsh medium provision was capable of being introduced within that area, and therefore you were technically considering whether the application of Section 55 5B applied in this circumstance. So I hope that clarifies that issue for you. Councillor Allen also raised the issue of judicial review. I think he suggested that Cabinet were implemented the judicial review. I think that may have been, well, it's certainly an error because the judicial review in this particular case came from a third party. I thought I'd just clarify that for anybody who may have been listening at home.
Apologies if I used the wrong words, but encouraged a judicial review is what my intention was to say. Apologies, I'm not sure what I did say, so thank you.
I have an indication that Lynette, you wish to contribute something at this stage or later.
At this stage, if possible, Leader.
Yes, please.
Just
Please
to mention around the delay situation, we were still at that point of time awaiting the outcome of the judicial reviews, so that it was very close to the end of term, as we know, and we were waiting the outcome, so we would have needed to have delayed for some time. Whether it would be a full academic year or whether it would have been a term is a debate in itself, but certainly the judicial review still hadn't been undertaken at the time that the Cabinet made the decision to delay. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, it's cleared up a number of issues nicely. Thank you. Councillor Gwynfor Thomas, Chairman of the Scrutiny Committee, please.
Thank you, Leader. You caught me relaxing in my chair then. I wasn't expecting to come next, but thank you very much for that opportunity to speak today.
No problem.
It's pretty clear from our recommendation report that we're in support of the offer's recommendation here. But I do think there is a certain deja vu because the findings which the officers have put back to are certainly some of the recommendations which we made from our July meeting on this report. I find it very frustrating because the portfolio holder chose not to respond to those recommendations, and yet when officers make similar recommendations, they become the narrative for a report. So I do think the voice of scrutiny isn't being heard here. It was very clear what we recommended, and officers have put back to it. So I think it's essential that you move this report now and realise that it has had the adequate scrutiny and the member input that it has had. I'm really disappointed. I do think you are ignoring scrutiny, and today to hear, and I'm assuming you won't let me speak at a further item. I'm just going to say you've now pulled another report which we dealt with in scrutiny last week. It was the two reports we swiftly put into our diary, and now you're saying that you're going to consider it on January the 17th, wherein you've got further information. So I'm assuming now you're expecting us to meet now before January the 17th. I'm sorry, but as chairman of scrutiny, I can't make any political comments, but putting the jigsaw pieces together, and in view of that, you had two cabinet assistants speaking at our scrutiny meeting illegally last week. I'm sorry, but there seems to be a certain influence to calm the voice of scrutiny here, and I'm really, really disappointed. But I'm here to speak on the Dolly report today, and I've spoke on that. But I'm not happy with the process which has been proceeded, and some of the recommendations which we made, where it's not fair on the school community, teachers or pupils, and I'm really, really disappointed. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. For those who are not in the council and listening as members of the public, they're probably somewhat confused by your comments regarding this attendance at scrutiny the other day of two members who I've appointed as cabinet assistants. An error was made. I apologise for that error. I was not aware that they were attending, and they were not aware as new members of the council that they shouldn't attend. So it was simply an administrative mistake. And then now,
I certainly accept that apology, but they were very influential in that debate on last week, and I'm very disappointed with that, whether it was a mistake or not. It was very influential, and they were allowed to make their comments, which is frustrating.
Members, I think that the leader's broadband is down. Oh, James, are you back?
I can hear everybody. I'm very sorry. Did Councillor Jeff Morgan, did you hear me invite you into the meeting?
No, I didn't. I've got it now. Thank you very
Hello?
much for the chance to speak today. As we've heard the questionnaire, there was 98 positives out of 228, 43%. I asked at the scrutiny what number was needed to be viable. Apparently there was no number. It was down to the comments. So the goalposts weren't moved. There was no goalposts, and I feel that was wrong. We're losing Welsh speakers at a rate of knots. Yet the Welsh Assembly want 1 million to speak by 2050. How are we going to do that? I can't speak Welsh. I'm in the middle of Wales. That's down to Radnor District Council. And I feel discriminated against in all these years. There's a lot of jobs that I can't apply for because I cannot speak Welsh. And these 98 positives, I feel there were too many. With 35 children in Dolly and room for a few more, it was obviously going to draw pupils from Trevonnan and Raider. And that's what the public want. They want small schools. It shows. And I think our job is to do what the public want and retain these small schools. And I'd like to ask the Cabinet to think long and hard before voting today, because there's a generation of kids' futures are in their hands. So just think long and hard before you vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for your brevity as well, and straight to the point. So thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to also thank Councillor Grenfell-Thomas for the recommendations from scrutiny, which we have indeed looked at and taken seriously. So my thanks for that. Members of the Cabinet now, I think I've got no other non-Cabinet members wishing to speak at the moment. Who would any Cabinet member like to speak at this point? Thank you. Richard, Councillor Richard Church, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think a lot of us, excuse me, were very disappointed by the news last week in the decline of the number of Welsh speakers evidenced by the census. And a lot of people on this council and outside it have worked very hard to promote the Welsh language in many different parts of our county. And indeed, I'm very proud to be the governor of a newly established Welsh medium school here in Welshpool, in what is predominantly an English-speaking town. So I've got a couple of questions which I hope can be answered this morning. One is, what can we do, particularly in the East Radnorshire area, which is a very Anglophone area, to promote the Welsh language within that area, if it is not to be through a school like this? And secondly, what is the role and what attachment should we give to the views of the Welsh Medium Educational Forum, and what weight can we place on its recommendations, particularly bearing in mind that we know it exists in order to promote Welsh medium education throughout Powys, because it does seem, and I think perhaps Councillor Elwyn indicated this in what he said, rather surprising that that body is not supporting the proposal in front of us. So how do we attach or what weight can we give to their evidence, and what are the alternatives for the people of East Radnorshire?
I could invite either portfolio holder or officers to answer that. Would Marianne or Lynette?
Yeah, can I come in?
Yes, please do.
Right, can I just go back one step as well before I answer this question? And the comment made by Councillor Morgan around a figure for a school being that we would support a school moving down the route of a Welsh medium school. What we have to do when we do these pieces of work, and they're complex pieces of work, we have to look at all the different bits of information and evidence coming through. So a questionnaire will give you a figure, a quantitative figure. Questionnaires or responses to consultation will give you people's views, etc. So those are the two things that we have to look at, you know, side by side, but also we have to look at other things. So we have to look at the finances. We have to look at whether it's geographically possible. We have to look at whether it's operationally possible. So we have to look at everything in the round is probably what I'm trying to say, and that is the basis of our conclusion. Your question around, can you repeat your question while I've gone off on that trail, Councillor Richard?
Well, it's twofold. Firstly, what weight should we attach to the evidence of the Welsh Education Forum, which has been referred to, and what is its role within this process? And secondly, particularly bearing in mind the decline in Welsh speaking as evidenced by the census, what alternative proposals do we have to increase the opportunities for the learning of Welsh within East Radnorshire?
Okay, I'll start with the forum. The WESP is a statutory document that every local authority has to produce, and attached to the WESP are the Welsh Medium Education Forums, and each local authority has a forum. The purpose of the forum is to monitor the WESP in essence, to make sure that the local authorities achieve what they need to achieve, challenge the local authorities. Within a number of local authorities, they are chaired by directors of education. In this case, it's chaired by Councillor Elwyn in his role as chair of Menter Maldwyn. They are basically a forum of experts in the field, I would suggest. So you have the likes of Welsh Government attend the forum. You have the likes of RHAG, which is the parent support group, which is a national body. You have Mudiad Meithrin, which is the early years provider, plus a range of schools. So on our forum, we have representatives of Welsh medium schools, dual stream schools, etc. across the piece, and early years providers as well. So they are a very interested but expert group, which are there to sort of advise, challenge and monitor the work of the local authority. So I don't know whether Councillor Elwyn would like to come in on that, but that's the purpose of the forum.
Elwyn, did you want to expand on that?
Well, yes, I think that is a good synopsis to basically, as I said, I'm wearing a different hat to usual here today, and it is very much about giving advice from experience and knowledge of the field. In that sense, you know, and the WESPs have gained legal status in recent times with the new government in Cardiff, so it does have more clout than with previous administrations, I would say. It's obviously up to you how much weight you want to put to that, but I would suggest that many of the members have a very long held track record in such matters.
Richard, are you happy with those responses?
I think that the second part of my question, James, was concerning what do we plan to do to increase the opportunities for the learning of the Welsh language within East Radnorshire?
Okay, I'll come back in on that one. So in our WESP, we do have a commitment to develop Welsh medium provision in areas of there is no Welsh medium provision, and also to move schools along the language continuum as well. The Prestine area has been identified as one of those areas which currently doesn't have any Welsh medium provision at all. we need to, as an authority, and there's a commitment in the WESP again, we need to, as an authority, really increase the way we promote Welsh medium education and bilingualism to families. It's a very positive development, in my opinion, that there has been such support in favour of Welsh medium education in the Dole area and as part of this this piece of work, which means that the people's awareness of Welsh medium education is probably now much improved in that area, and we need, as an authority, to start to build on that. So I'd be looking to engagement within sort of the Pristine and the Knighton areas, but on a very sort of local level. We need discussions with the Mudiad Meithrin. We need to see whether we could establish TMV groups in those areas. But what I'm saying is, in those areas where we can actually have the potential for real growth and over the years. So that's where I'd want to see our work in developing Welsh medium going next. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members, any other member wishing? Jackie Charlton, please. Councillor Jackie Charlton.
Thank you, Leader. I think it follows on basically from what Councillor Richard has been talking about, which is the viability of Welsh medium schools. And I'm interested, Councillor Deborah Edwards, who is the local member, suggested that the Minister of Education said that no Welsh medium school was not viable. So every suggestion or every implementation of a Welsh medium school should be seen as viable. And I just wondered what support Welsh Government are giving if they're making statements like that, because we can see from the presentation that we've had that it's actually very difficult for local authorities to make Welsh medium schools viable in many cases. And in this particular case, I think it's been suggested that it would be very difficult to make this viable for lots of other reasons, but specifically around the finances. So I wondered if I could get some feedback on that, please, because it has been expressed here, and the fact that it's been expressed by the local member, I think it's important, we shouldn't ignore.
Yeah, shall I come in again?
Yeah.
This is something that has been a particular concern of ours for a number of years. We have lobbied Welsh Government for the need for pump priming for Welsh medium provision. So we need a revenue stream to support new developments, because developing new Welsh medium provision will cost. The cost is currently borne from the rest of the school's budget, so we would have to find the funding for new development from within. But the Welsh Government also they do have capital funding sometimes to support Welsh medium provision, but I always go back to them and say it's not capital we need in Powys, it's revenue we need in order to pump prime. So if that message can continue to be delivered to Welsh Government colleagues, I'd be very grateful for that, because we do need that in order to support these new developments.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. You happy with that response?
I'm happy with that response, thank you. It does explain a lot, and yes, I agree with Marianne. It's now our job to continue to lobby and do what we can to support language and the Welsh medium language across our county. Thank you.
Good. Are there any other members wishing to speak?
Leader, I think Councillor Sandra wishes to speak for the chat.
Thank you, Clive. Sandra, please. Councillor Sandra Davies. Thank you.
Thank you, Clive. Thank you for putting in the chat. I had a few problems with my technology this morning. I just want to say again, coming back to what Aled had said, I really do feel passionately about the Welsh language. I am the LEA representative on the biggest Welsh primary school in Powys. Very proud to be that, but we need to promote the Welsh language, but we have to have a balancing act and be realistic. If our schools are very, very small, how are we going to promote Welsh language in a very, very small school when the discussion really is not regarding the language in that area, but the actual size of the school and the progression of the school? How would that school grow in that community? It's not feasible, and that's the discussion that we are having here today regarding the size and the position of that school. We need to look realistically, as Marianne has already mentioned. It has to be in areas of real growth and being realistic to do that. And then I'm hoping that we will be able to progress that Welsh language, not only within the primary school, but into secondary schools, etc. So it's looking holistically at the whole of Powys and seeing how we can really tap into what financial support we've got, what local support we've got in working together to work and promote the Welsh language, which is important. I take on board what Aled has said in his comments, and I do want to work really hard to promote Welsh language and to follow through what has been put in the West and to grow it more. But we have to be realistic in how we are doing this. And as I said, look at the whole area and put it into context with the financial amount of monies that we've got in our pot as well. So I'm hoping that that makes some sense to you, but we have to look forward and the bigger picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Any other contributors before I move to the portfolio holder? Lynette, please.
Yeah. Just a couple of things, Leader, just to say, you know, it is encouraging to hear this discussion around Welsh medium education, not only as a director of education, but also as a parent who sent my children for Welsh medium education, and I have not regretted it at all. In fact, I'm a big advocate of Welsh medium education. Just a couple of pointers on that is that we do have some, strong Welsh medium provision in the local schools there, Ysgol Trefonen and Ysgol Rhaeadr Church in Wales, that have recently been inspected by Estyn. So I just want to make Cabinet aware of that. They both have dual streams currently, but going forward, relating to Councillor Church's comments really about growing. I know it's not East Radnorshire, but we do need to strengthen the Welsh medium provision in both of those schools, and we have done already. We've had children who have accessed the Trochi programme from that area and have actually changed into the Welsh medium streams. So we do need to, so if there's interest in that area for Welsh medium, we do know we've got those two streams within those two schools that have just been through an Estyn inspection. So that was just the only comment I wanted to make, really. And the other pointer is that we do need a clear pathway through in Welsh medium education. As I say, as a parent who sent mine through the Welsh medium system, that pathway, and it was made very clear to me as a parent that the commitment to Welsh medium was right the way through, and we need that provision in Powys. So I think going forward as a local authority, looking at expanding the primary provision, but also making sure we've got those clear pathways of education right the way through the system as we move forward. But it is encouraging to hear the interest in the Welsh medium education debate today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynette. Are there any other speakers?
Yeah.
So I heard a yes.
Yes, me again, sorry.
Oh, Marianne, sorry, I must explain, Marianne. I can't see you because you're just a black square on my screen. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. Okay. Can I just cover off one other thing as well? There's been some queries around the capacity of the school and the potential for it to be reconfigured to become a larger school, etc., in order to sort of deal with the growth. Can I just say here then, the capacity of the school is 36 school places at the moment. It has two main classrooms and a couple of other rooms, so classes, libraries, and etc. So just for people to understand, the capacity of a school is calculated using Welsh Government guidance measuring capacity of schools in Wales. And colleagues in the Property Service carry out an exercise to confirm the capacities of schools, because then that indicates the admission number as well. So for a primary school, the capacity is calculated on the size of rooms which are designated as class spaces, and I think this is an important factor. So specialist and support rooms such as libraries, IT, staff rooms, etc. are not included in the calculation, but must all be measured. So then the spaces in the classrooms are then checked against the total usable space available to see if there's too much or too little space to support core teaching activities. So technically, the space allowance for a pupil in a classroom is 1.8 square metres, which means that a standard classroom for 30 pupils is around 56 square metres or more. So in terms of how this relates to Llanfihangel Rhydyson School, as I said, the school has two class spaces, classrooms, one of 47 square metres and then a smaller one of 33 square metres. And it also has two ancillary rooms used by the pupils, categorised as library and a library cooking room. Both of these are 26 square metres and 17 square metres. So the largest class space has an allocation of 25 pupil places and the smaller class space has an allocation of 17 places. So you can see they are slightly smaller classrooms than we could could accommodate, you know, a class of 30 pupils. So I think the governors have indicated that the school could, with some reconfiguration and the use of the Cylch Meithrin Caban mobile, which is in the classroom, which is on the grounds, that they could have a capacity of around 86. What I'm suggesting is that would not be particularly possible without additional capital funding, which is one of the reasons that why we deem it to be not a viable option going forward. So it isn't configured yet to be an 80 pupil school, and there'd need to be investment in toileting facilities, cloakrooms, etc. There'd be a cost to remodelling the Cylch Caban to include toilets for older children if that's required, and then plus if the Cylch moved into the community hall, that provision would need to become CIW registered and would need additional works required to meet the needs of that as well. So I hope that's sort of a long-winded way of clarifying why we deem the building issue to be a factor that sort of supports our views.
Good. Thank you for that information, Marianne. That helps. It's very helpful. Sian Cox, I have a feeling you may have a question.
Thank you, James. Yes, I've got a question about, we've had some concerns raised about the delay and the impact that the delay caused by the review has had on people, and I'm just wondering if we could sort of have a quick summary of what the costs of that delay have been and what the benefits of it have. We know that we've been able to find out quite a lot about the appetite for Welsh medium education in the area, which seems to me to be valuable. But could we summarise what the costs have been and any other benefits as well?
Thank you. Jane Thomas may be able to help us with this, Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you, Leader. In terms of the costs, we don't have full costs established for this around officer time and so on that's taken place in developing this, but I can tell you that from a delegated funding perspective, the extension of the closure around this has resulted in additional delegated funding of 225,000. So that's the impact on the school's funding formula. There have been some property works undertaken at Llanfihangel Rhydyson, and that's approximately £1,600 in terms of that. We are also seeing at the moment, but we're still working with the school on this, an increase in their deficit now projected as a result of the extension. They were in surplus, I think, when the previous decision was taken. They're now heading for a deficit, but we will work with the school to try and limit that as much as possible. So I think that gives you sort of a flavour of that. What I don't have is the staff time, as I said, because we haven't actually undertaken that calculation, but that would be significant.
Okay, Sian, you happy with that?
Yeah, thank you, Jan. I don't know if officers or Pete want to comment on other benefits to having done this.
Opportune moment to bring the portfolio holder in. I don't think I've got any other speakers particularly wishing to speak. Pete? Councillor Pete Roberts, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think the one thing I would highlight in terms of the costs is that just as we've recently done with Craddock School, had we not gone forward with the proposal that we put forward in July, we would still have had to come forward with proposals to delay the implementation, because as Lynette had indicated in scrutiny, with the judicial review overhanging the decision, the physical implementation of the closure had not been started and would have been delayed until at least January. And as Lynette indicated in scrutiny, it is beneficial to move pupils at the start of an academic year rather than the middle of an academic year. So with that decision having been taken during the PERDA period, we would have still had to implement that in Cabinet to formalise the delay. So in terms of the benefits, officers may wish to add to this, but my feelings of the main benefits that we've received and benefit from this are that we've gained a clearer indication about what we need to do to stimulate interest and commitment into moving forward with Welsh medium education. There was a quite clear lack of awareness of what Welsh medium education means, particularly for monolingual English parents, and the levels of support that are out there, actually quite easily available on the internet. And we need, as an authority, working with our partners within the Welsh Medium Education Forum, to learn from this process and look at how we promote across the board the benefits and the opportunities that are provided. I can see him, so I will to her at this point possibly add some more.
Director Les, Lynette.
Okay. Thank you, Leader. I was just going to mention transition arrangements, really, and it's really important for pupils, particularly if there are pupils within that area who want to transfer for Welsh medium, that they have trochę support, etc. So should the Cabinet make the decision today, we would have plenty of transition time for those pupils to make sure that that is effective going forward. If it is rushed at the end of an academic year, it's not ideal for children, and at the end of the day it's about children, and the transition arrangements that need to be in place give us time to work with families should they want Welsh medium education. Should the decision today be that it's not at Dolau, then we need to work with the families who've expressed an interest for Welsh medium education to put that trochę support in, and we would have 2 terms to look at all of that. It wouldn't be rushed. So I think that's one of the benefits, possibly. It gives us time to transition the pupils effectively should the decision be made today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Education. Thank you. Okay, I think it's time we sum this up and put it to the meeting. Councillor Pete Roberts, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This is a decision faced before us that is quite a clear-cut one. The officer's report has thoroughly explored the one area of concern that I had during previous administration as a scrutiny chair, and it has found wanting. The Welsh Medium Education Forum, and the question was asked, what weight should we put on that? I think we should put an exceptional amount of weight on that, to the extent that had they come back saying there is an opportunity here, I would have been going back to officers and probably asking them to look at this again. I sat in on their meeting. It was a very comprehensive meeting. Elwyn's comments on it are a very thorough and very accurate recollection of that meeting, and I thank that group comprehensively for the thorough work that they did, that they agreed with the officer's recommendation. Likewise, the scrutiny meeting. I recommend Councillor Gwynn. Again, that found the officers' recommendations to be appropriate. I've been lobbied over the past few days, and it was mentioned by Councillor Debs that there has been discussions with the Welsh Education Minister. Had something been forthcoming from that, then we would obviously have had to consider that. But there has been no communication with the authority. So we are in a position where all three of our main advising organisations within the council are advising us to move forward with this recommendation. Disappointed though I am, I believe very strongly that we should be looking at innovative approaches to growing the Welsh language, which is why I gave this the consideration that it merited. I also believe we should be encouraging communities as a whole, rather than just the children, to embrace the Welsh language. But I am left with the conclusion today that as much as I might want to go forward with this proposal, the evidence from our officers, the evidence from our advisors, and the responses from our peers is saying that this is not the time and not the place to move forward with this proposal. I thank all of them for that advice. Shift to a different screen and read out the recommendations if you would like me to, Leader.
Please do, and then we'll put it to the vote.
Frozen, or has James frozen?
You are very indistinct, Pete.
I thought I might be. I've been having connectivity problems for the last 5 minutes.
You're okay now, so put the recommendations now.
Yeah, the recommendations are to note the officer advice that establishment of Welsh medium provision in Dolly is not viable, and secondly, to implement the decision made by the previous cabinet to close Llanfihangel and CP School from the 31st of August 2023, as circumstances have not altered since the decision of the former cabinet on the 8th of February 2022, such that the implementation will be inappropriate altogether. I would move that recommendation, and Leader, if I can just come back after the vote is taken.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? For those recommendations, please. Councillor Richard Church, seconded. All those in favour of the recommendations, please indicate clearly. Thank you. As far as I can tell, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Decision taken.
Sorry, Leader, can we just clarify as well that Councillor Sandra is voting on behalf of herself and Councillor Sue McNicholas, that only one of them have voted today?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
And to be clear, you called it unanimous, but I did not vote.
Of those entitled to vote, it was unanimous. Thank you. So, I suggest 5-minute comfort break. And I literally need 5 minutes.
Can I come back briefly?
You may. You may.
The decision that we took as a cabinet in July had two parts to it. The second part was if we decided to move forward and implement the previous decision, we would undertake work with the community to look at an ongoing legacy on the site. The site already has a TRV and an ysgolhaethrin operating there within one of the, essentially a porter cabin on the site. I know from the Welsh Medium Education Forum there was a desire from representatives from ysgolhaethrin as an organisation to look forward as to how we can protect that provision so that there is still some form of education within the village. There is also the wider issues that were raised during the original consultation about what can and cannot be done on the site. And I now just wanted to inform Cabinet and people watching that officers will now be going away and looking at all of the options and working with the community such that when the process has been completed, there will be a legacy of some kind on the site. I also wanted to highlight that officers will now be working with the school over the coming months to facilitate as smooth a transition as possible for the pupils that are there, and that will include specialist psychological support to ensure that what could be a very traumatic experience for individual pupils is undertaken in the most conducive manner possible, and ensuring that all pupils have the best available support to them to meet their specific individual needs as a result of this decision. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Councillor Pete Roberts. Thank you. Good. Okay. We move to item 6 at 11:30. We have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry, Leader, you're on mute.
Thank you, Steve. My apologies, everybody. It's 11:30. It's time we moved on to the next item on the agenda, which is in the name of Jake Berriman, please. Item 6, not in our pack, page 143.
Thank you, Chair. The next item I don't think is going to keep you. It's for information only and for noting. It's the Annual Information Governance Report 2021 to 22. The report has been to scrutiny, been subject to a scrutiny process. Scrutiny themselves raised some in-depth questions which have now been answered to scrutiny, and therefore I think the report is simply ready to note, bearing in mind it was for the previous year and we're well into this year. So I don't propose to speak to it any further, Chair.
Thank you. Do any members have questions before I bring any? Is there an officer who'd like to make any comment about this report? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Leader, sorry. Oh.
Go on.
Sorry, just indicating that the report sets out in full the information which needs to be before Cabinet today. I think Councillor Jake is taking a pragmatic view, and it's there to be read, and everything is there. So thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. Are there any members? Bear in mind, there aren't hands, so wave or shout if you wish to speak, please. No. Okay, so recommendation, Jake, is Matthew. Thank you. Deputy Leader of the Council, please.
Thanks, James. Sorry, I was a bit slow on the clicker there. Thanks for the report. Can I just ask the portfolio holder in relation to security incidents? The number has increased for the reportable incidents. Can you just give us assurance that he's confident the appropriate controls are in place going forward in relation to these matters?
Yes, I mean, I think this is one of those areas that we're right to show interest in and be concerned about. It's one of those areas in looking through where additional resources are required, that this is an area certainly that we can't make cuts and we need to support, because absolutely it's critical that we get this right. I'm assured Scrutiny has asked penetrating questions in respect of this and had a response, and I'm ensured that we will be doing more work to ensure that we safeguard this area.
Okay, thank you very much. Monitoring Officer, do we need to vote, or we're just receiving this report, aren't we?
Just a note, Chair.
Just a note, Chair, and happy with it. We don't need to take a vote on that.
Thank you. Okay, duly noted. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the REPA Act, as it's known, and it's in the name of the Head of Legal Services. So, Clive, could you take us through this, please? No?
Sorry, Leader, I was having difficulty getting the camera back on.
Down. Yeah, no worries. Don't worry, it's fine.
Leader, members, thank you very much. This report sets out the aim of doing three things. The first is to note the number of RIPA investigations. These are covert investigations undertaken by the council, and to note the number of covert surveillance operations that took place during the period from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. And members will see from paragraph 31 that there have been no such covert surveillance operations during that period of time. The second aim of the report is to ask for approval of Cabinet for a revised RIPA policy and the RIPA policy is an extensive document which starts on page 171 of the bundle, and I'm not going to go through that with you this morning. It has been extensively revised to take into account a number of matters, but one of the things it has taken into account, and this is the third part of the report records the outcome of an investigation by the OSC which occurred in July of 2022. Members will see from the report that we had a certain negative comments with regard to that investigation. A action plan has been put in place to deal with the issues which has been raised by the Investigative Powers Commissioner, or you'll see from paragraph 441 of the report that there are 21 actions in that action plan. 15 are being completed, 5 are still in progress, 1 is over timescale, and that one which is over timescale is the recommendation for Cabinet to approve the new RIPA policy which is being asked for this morning. So apologies for that being over timescale. We had thought initially that the EMT could approve it, but it needs a formal approval by Cabinet members. So apologies for that. Members, the report, as I said, sets out those 3 things, and I'd ask for a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation, which can be found on page 170.
Okay, member Richard, thank you. Portfolio holder, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm the portfolio holder really only for one aspect of this, although obviously it is staff, particularly within the fields of public protection, who particularly use the RIPA Act in terms of their work, but it could be used elsewhere. And I actually take this report very seriously, and also the results of the inspection that was conducted here. And it's probably, from my point of view, as somebody who is concerned for civil liberties and the protection of people's privacy, that people need to be confident that the terms under which covert surveillance is undertaken are very clearly set out, and people have confidence that they will not have people spying on them without any proper regulation and control of how that is done. And it's clear that in the past, albeit 2 or 3 years ago, this council let people down in that respect. And we're now seeking to put that right. And I would like to thank Clive Pinney for the work he has done in bringing this to our attention, and also for bringing it to Cabinet today, because I think actually it's important that a policy like this is approved by Cabinet, because this is a very public-facing issue in terms of protecting people's privacy and civil liberties. So it's right that it comes here, and that we put right the mistakes that have gone on in the past. Because it can happen in a whole range of the council's work. We might not use it often, but we do occasionally. And I think people have to be confident that we use it properly. And I hope that that puts this right. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Richard. Councillor Jake Berriman, please.
Yes, if Richard's moving it as the principal portfolio holder, I mean, some areas of RIPA control fall within planning enforcement. For instance, as you might well be aware, I'm familiar with the provisions, and it was disappointing to receive the report that we had, of the briefing that we had on this. But having said that, the way it has now been handled has been really exemplary, and I have gone through the policy in some detail, and as I know Councillor Richard has, and I'm content that should we now comply with the policy, then we will be behaving towards others in a most appropriate way, whilst still going around the difficult tasks that we have as a council to carry out covert investigations on occasion. So I'm more than happy to second that. And just in case you can't see him waving, James, Matthew's got his hand up.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Yes, please, Councillor Matthew Torrance.
Thanks, Jake. I guess this is a question more for Clive, if I may, Leader. The flow chart that's included within the policy, I thought was really helpful to understand how this works in practice and the steps and the assurances that the local authority has to seek in order to be able to undertake this. And it sets out quite clearly and simply, I thought that this isn't just a on the whim decision. There's actually some thought and process to this. What I didn't understand, though, was once that permission is granted by a magistrate in the process, whether there's a time limit on that where it would need to be reapplied for, or would it apply for as long as required to undertake the investigation? Just some clarity on that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
The time scale in which the investigation it can be open is usually specified on the document itself, so the magistrates will approve the time scale. Councillor Matthew, and can I just go back to an issue which Councillor Jake raised earlier on in terms of ensuring compliance going forward? There is a set number of senior officers who can approve from the council's point of view these applications, and that has to go on to a magistrate in addition to that. But just for members to be assured that I will be meeting personally with those authorising officers once every quarter to make sure that things are complied with and keep an eye on it. So I hope I give that extra assurance to you.
Good. Can I just come back, Leader, if I may?
Yeah,
so,
please do.
Thanks for that, Clive. I think it's helpful, but I just want to get this right so I understand. So once that time limit that you mentioned is up, is that a new application then back to the magistrate or an extension?
New application.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Jackie Charlton, please.
Thank you, Leader. It takes a little while to get the cursor back onto the unmuting me. I agree with everything that's been said here. I haven't got anything to add to that. It is a very, very in-depth policy. It is quite complex and it is quite legalistic. How do we make sure that members of the public know how to read this policy for a start, but how are we communicating it to make sure that people understand what happens should they ever be under surveillance, or we have to use this? How do members of the public understand what we are trying to achieve here?
Councillor Jackie, it's a really good question. Of course, the policy is written for council officers predominantly, and of course, in terms of how council officers understand the policy, well, obviously they can read it, but in addition to that, we have undertaken two forms of training. We've done some e-training, and more recently we've had a full day's training for those officers who can normally be involved in this type of process. Insofar as the members of the public are concerned, well, mostly these will be covert surveillances of those who may be engaged in criminal activity, and insofar as that is concerned, they will only become aware of it should they be charged with a criminal offence, in which case they will have the protection from their own legal representation.
Could I just come back and say innocent until proven guilty? And I think
Absolutely.
that's a very important issue to understand. And we may be surveying people that actually are innocent. Hopefully that will emerge in any surveillance. But on the other hand, should we be clear about how we survey and making sure that people understand that? That's the point I'm trying to make. But thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other members wishing to speak on this issue? No? Okay. So Clive, remind me what we have to do. We have to note this, or do we have to vote for it?
Leader, Councillor Richard has proposed, Councillor Jake has second, so we need to vote on the recommendations, and I'm trying to get back up to the recommendations, sure. Chair. So bear with me.
Just you want me to read them out?
Well, Helen, just to also say that in the chat, Helen Dolman has helpfully provided more guidance on the length of time that these authorisations can last. I think I'm right in saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the recommendations,
Thank
Chair.
So the recommendations, Leader, are the Cabinet notes the Council has not utilised RIPA in the financial year 21-22, and the activity undertaken in response to the Commissioner's report. Number 2, that the Cabinet approves the revised RIPA policy as set out in Appendix page to the report to take effect immediately.
Good. Okay, I've had a proposer and seconder. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you. That's passed. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, and we'll move on. We have some. Next on the agenda is the medium-term financial strategy, which was to follow. Have all members got a copy of that? If any member hasn't, please say. Okay, good. Okay, Councillor David Thomas, please.
Thank you, Leader. The report that we're bringing to you today is for you to consider the revised assumptions and approach in compiling the revised medium-term financial strategy and updated financial model. It'll also provide you with some initial information on the provisional settlement for local government and the allocation for powers. Just as some background, the medium-term financial strategy has been developed as part of the overall strategic planning for the Council and will give regard for the new corporate plan, which is being finalised over the coming weeks. The strategy captures the financial, regulatory and policy drivers affecting the Council and sets the direction and approach through to 2028. The financial strategy is a link between the organisation's long-term service objectives and its financial capacity. It seeks to ensure that the Council's strategic objectives can be achieved within the confines of the financial resources available. You'll be aware that the provisional settlement was announced on the 14th of December, and this report provides an update on the funding allocation received. I must emphasise, though, that the impact of this has not yet been fully considered or reflected in the medium-term financial strategy. And Jane will make that perfectly clear when she goes through the updated draft strategy with you. The strategy will be updated when the implications of the settlement have been fully considered and the final budget proposal prepared. The final documents will be agreed as part of the final budget pack to be approved at Cabinet in January, then reviewed by scrutiny committees before final approval at Council in February 2023. I'll now hand over to our 151 officer who will take us through the changes within the draft strategy.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet will recall that we provided a report back in September that started to reflect the impact that the rising in costs and inflation and so on were having on the Council's budget. And you'll be aware that at that point we look to reflect some of the mitigating actions that we would need to take as a result of balancing up this year's budget. This report and the strategy does look at future years in a little bit more detail, but it's to be aware that obviously that is still having a significant impact on the Council. Section 3 of the report starts to tease out a little bit more around the main drivers for that, and you've got the detail there in the report. But inflation is having a significant impact on the Council, and to put that into context, a 1% rise on non-pay elements would cost the Council roughly an additional £1 million for each percent. So when we've got inflation running at around 10 or 11% as we've seen, then obviously that has a significant impact on the Council's financial position. Energy costs, fuel, food, real living wage, pay awards, contractual inflationary impacts, all of that we have had to change in terms of the assumptions that we work through when we're putting together our financial plans. So it's important that we update that strategy based on revising those assumptions, which are a key factor in that. And again, in section 3 of the report, it goes through the main headings of those in a little bit more detail. So employee costs are having a significant impact on us. The cost of the real living wage, the Council is an advocate of real living wage and looks to fulfil that commitment through the funding that was supported from Welsh Government previously. But obviously the increase in the real living wage from April now needs to be clearly factored into our plans. We are aware that Welsh Government has put additional funding into our settlement to enable us to meet some of those costs. We're still working through that in detail to establish whether that funding does meet all of those costs for us as a council, so that continues. We purchase our energy through Crown Commercial Services. We have new contracts coming in place from April. So obviously we're looking at the impact of that, because we will see significant increases on both gas and electricity, and that will impact across all of our services. But probably the biggest impacts we are seeing on those will be for our schools and all of those premises related services that we deliver, and our street lighting network. So those will have a significant impact across the piece. In addition to the actual cost implications of inflation, the cost of living challenge more generally is seen as having to support our residents more, and we are seeing an increase in demand for some of our services. We're seeing increasing levels of homelessness, we're seeing increasing referrals to social services, and we are clearly looking to support our residents there with money advice team and so on, to help wherever we can. A table's been included in the report at 3.8, and that really highlights the change in the inflation factors that we build into our medium-term financial strategy. And you can see there we're seeing significant increases in those inflation assumptions, and that is creating over £15 million worth of pressure on the council's budget. The capital programme is also seeing an impact. We're seeing increasing costs in terms of the cost of some of our schemes, and that's because of rising material costs and construction costs. But it's also then impacting on our borrowing costs. So when the council borrows to fund that capital programme, the rate at which we borrow has again been impacted by the change in interest rates implemented by the Bank of England, and we are having to update our funding scenarios to accommodate that increase in borrowing costs too. Future funding, when we originally approved the medium-term financial strategy back in April last year, we were basing our funding then on indicative allocations provided by Welsh Government last autumn. Those are being revised, and now that we have the final settlement, or the provisional settlement, should I say, we have that information now, and I'll touch on that a little further. We'll need to change our funding assumptions as we work that through in detail. The modelling that you see before you still models a 5% increase in council tax. It's important to note that that hasn't been a decision made yet by Cabinet, and obviously we will work with Cabinet to look at that in light of the settlement and all of the other costs that we're now seeing imposed upon us as we finalise the budget proposal that Cabinet will formally propose in January. So that is yet to be decided. We do generate a significant amount of fees and charges. Charges that we raise can contribute to just over 70 million into our council's budget. And again, our policy of full cost recovery there will consider inflationary impacts in terms of our costs. So that will feature again in the final budget proposal when we propose the fees and charges for the following year. The strategy to bridge the gap that is set out within the medium-term financial strategy, so that's quite an extensive document that accompanies this report, does pick up on the ways in which we will look to close that budget gap over the period of the strategy. And much of that remains the same, although we are looking more closely now at defining what the council of the future might look like, and that work is being undertaken now, and we will be putting, I think a survey's already gone out to the public to help us answer some of that as well, with input from our residents being key there as well, so that work will continue. Section 7 of the report does provide an update in terms of our funding that we've received through the provisional settlement. For local authorities across Wales, we are set to receive 5.5 billion from Welsh Government in RSG, which is the Revenue Support Grant, and our non-domestic rates funding as well. And the indicative Wales allocation for 24-25 in that settlement is proposed currently indicatively at 5.69 billion. So an increase again for next year, albeit within sort of very low increase levels of around the 3% as far as we can see at the moment. The settlement does include additional funding for education, and that is as part of the consequential that we saw coming through from the UK government to Welsh government. So Welsh government have passed on that additional funding, and that funding of course funds our schools through the money that we give them, and that covers teachers, the wider education programmes, the free school meals element and the rollout of the new curriculum. All of that is what we will have to accommodate within the funding that we give to schools. The settlement is unhypothecated, and it is for council to decide how it allocates that funding, but we are clear, I think, in terms of the discussions that we have, how those rising costs are impacting on our schools and on our social services department with regard to the real living wage. So all of that is clearly being considered as we finalise our budget plan. In addition to the settlement, Welsh Government have also informed us that there is an extra £10 million going into schools via the education budget at Welsh Government. So that is likely to feature as additional grant funding coming through to us. And obviously we will be considering that as well in terms of how we finalise our budget proposal. There is also a continuation of funding for homelessness with £10 million still allocated there, and that continues on the Welsh Government commitment to the no one left out approach as we saw implemented in the previous year. There is also some support for businesses identified within the settlement, and we are seeing support packages there for non-domestic rates. There is also some transitional relief for ratepayers whose bills are set to increase through the UK revaluation exercise. So we will be able to benefit from that and pass on to businesses. And there is also further support for the retail, leisure and hospitality business through a support package there as well. So much of the detail around those is yet to be received, but I'm sure we are pleased to hear that that additional funding is there. In terms of the settlement for Powys and across Wales, local authorities have seen an increase of 7.9% in terms of the settlement that we see. And for Powys, our increase is now 8.7%, which gives us an additional 18.298 million on top of what we received in terms of last year's allocation. The settlement for Powys is more favourable from a financial perspective due to changes in some of the data that drives that funding, and we have seen changes there, particularly around free school meals and the number of recipients of benefits. So that change has increased the value of the funding that we get, but there are still some less favourable movements in terms of pupil numbers, and that detail is shown in some of the tables that you see later on in the report. Welsh Government have informed us as part of the provisional settlement that they do not plan to make any methodology or data changes by which we get the final settlement. However, they have made us aware that there will be an adjustment as there is some grant funding previously given to the Fire Authority directly that is now likely to drop into this financial settlement for the authority. So Cabinet will be aware that we pay a levy to the fire service for their budget across Mid and West Wales. That budget is funded through the authorities that are part of that area. For us last year, that was £7.8 million that we have to find from our settlement. Funding is provided through the settlement itself, but the council does pay in addition to the level of funding that we get from Welsh Government. The fire service is itself dealing with significant pressures arising from inflation and so forth, and we will see a significant increase in the levy that the council will have to make to the fire service, and that is something that Cabinet is fully considering as part of its budget proposal. And those figures will be finalised, but they may well increase in terms of what we've seen recently due to this transfer of grants. So we will keep a keen eye out for that as part of the final settlement. The medium-term financial strategy itself sets out a lot more detail. That will now need to be updated for the settlement figures that we received last week. And as Councillor David pointed out, the updated medium-term financial strategy will include that, and the impact of that will then carefully be considered as part of our budget proposal. I think it's important to note that the council, although having an improved settlement to what we expected, we are still facing significant cost pressures next year. The cost pressures we've identified thus far are over £40 million. So the additional settlement will go some way to help us breach that gap. However, it still leaves us with a considerable gap to balance our budget for next year and in future years. So there will be an extensive level of savings that will still be required, and of course in terms of council tax, that decision will also have to be taken. We are seeing an unprecedented challenge in terms of our financial position. We are in a much better place, I think, now in terms of our final plan for next year. We have, again, I have to say, focused on the short term out of necessity, but we know even our future settlements are likely to be lower than we've seen in previous years. In fact, if the current UK government proposes to stick with the funding scenarios announced by the Chancellor, we are likely to see much lower levels of settlement from 2025. So we will have to consider that now as we carefully plan over a longer term period and be mindful of that as we set our budget for next year. So we will be looking at that with you as we finalise the budget plan. So although welcomed, I think it's clear to say that we still do have a significant challenge ahead of us, and we will assess that fully now and update the financial position of the council for your consideration. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Jane. Quite a marathon for you, and thank you for sticking to and getting through it. That was a very comprehensive presentation. Right, I have a request from the Leader of the Opposition to comment on this item, which I have granted. Aled, before I bring in the rest of the Cabinet, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not sure whether I'd requested a chance to speak at this at an earlier point or not, but there's a number of reports coming to Cabinet late these days, so apologies for that.
No, that's fine.
David and Jane also mentioned the fact that there's a lot of updating to do within the medium-term financial strategy. I'm just wondering whether, and this is clearly a draft, and whether that should be reflected in the recommendations that you're accepting today, because the settlement has made a huge difference to the financial position in the next financial year. So the 10 million plus extra money that's not really budgeting for, but I still appreciate it's a really difficult position. Jane has touched on many of the issues I wanted to, so I'll just have a small bite today, if that's okay, Leader. Table 3.8, you're looking at the assumptions on teacher pay, etc., but it doesn't reflect the fact that there were some reserves put aside because there's indication of the last budget that the settlements would be higher, and reserves were put aside to enable those to be covered. I don't know whether that can be reflected at some point. I hope the finance man can have a look at this again at some point, but one of the significant changes was the figure 2 on page 18. Depends which copy I'm looking at, the of the medium-term MTFS, where the diagram has changed. In the old one, it had values and behaviours, then that's been dropped. Because it mentioned professional, positive, progressive, open, and collaborative. I'm wondering why that's been dropped. Is it because of the leisure fiasco? Is it because of the issues around school closures and transformation and the lateness of reports coming to Cabinet? I was just wondering why that has been changed, because even in the new one you're talking about a healthier Wales, about prevention, etc., and then it doesn't sit comfortably alongside the plans that you have or had for the leisure services, unless you are guaranteeing now going forward that the leisure provision will remain as it is and make sure that is invested in over the next few years. Maybe things have changed, but this here we certainly the UK government enabled the Welsh government to make a better settlement this time, so the settlement has jumped up by quite considerable amount of money, and it will help close that gap. I'm not 100% sure what the gap is now, whether that's been published at this point, but it does enable the leader to follow up on his commitment, a clear commitment that he made, that this cabinet would be going nowhere near the 5% increase in council tax. I was wondering whether you will stand by that commitment. Thank you, Leader.
Okay. There are a number of issues there, some of them technical and some of them not technical. Jane, would you like to deal with the technical questions, please?
Yes, I can do. Yes, Councillor Allard is right. At the end of last year, we did set aside some reserves, and we were starting to see the impact of inflation rising then. So we did set aside some reserves to meet some of those pressures, including pay. We are drawing on that support as part of this year's budget plan to meet those additional costs. But in terms of pay, the baselining of that additional cost features obviously in the budget proposal that we see, and that's about 4.6 million in terms of that baselining of those costs, so that will feature. In terms of the values still remain. They are not included in this document. We did look to rationalise the document and condense it slightly, and that is one of the things that we removed from this document specifically. But as I said, they do remain. They still feature in other areas of the council. So just want to highlight on that. In terms of the gap that you see within the medium-term financial strategy, that has clearly changed now in light of the settlement, and that is what we're working through now to recalculate that and recalculate obviously the savings and things that will be required to bridge the gap that remains. So Cabinet are working through that, and the tables will be updated and will feature as part of the final budget proposal in January.
Okay, have we missed anything? Council tax. Oh, you're on mute. Just on council tax. I don't know.
The element on recommendation, whether that should be draft should be reflected in the recommendation, but that's apologies. That's all.
Okay, so it's just a draft on. I mean, it's not for me to say. David, would you like to address that issue on the recommendations? Are you David Thomas? Could you explain again, Alan, what it is that you are concerned about? Because I'm not sure we are quite understanding.
Yes, I appreciate the timelines, the difficulties in reflecting the settlement that came through last Wednesday, wasn't it? I think it's made significant changes to some of the tables and the funding available to the council, and whether this. I can't get to the recommendations now, but whether the recommendations should reflect that this is just a draft and it will be updated as soon as possible. But it's a living document, I know, Jane. That's
okay.
Thank you.
I've got Clive indicating. I don't. David Thomas, you're on mute. Did you want to speak?
I think the recommendations do address the issue that it's in draft. So 13.2 states quite clearly the Cabinet note the initial information on the provisional settlement for local government and the allocation of powers, and then it goes on to say that officers update the MTFS and budget plan in light of the provisional settlement for further consideration by Cabinet over the coming weeks before finalising the budget proposal in January 2023. So that interprets to me anyway, that it is in draft.
Okay, I think that's fair enough.
Leader, that's the point I was going to make. So.
Okay, no problem. I've got Matthew waiting. Matthew Dorrance, please.
Thanks, Leader. This is a comprehensive document, and clearly significant amount of work has gone into this, and at pace to be able to turn it round in such detail as it is. So thanks from me to all the people involved in that, particularly Jane and Councillor David Thomas. It is a very good report. I just want to draw attention to a couple of bits really, rather than questions. So I guess reflections from myself. I think it's really important that despite a fantastic settlement from the Welsh Government, which clearly shows that Welsh Government have listened and acted on the pleas that we as a local government family across Wales have been making, they're committed to that partnership working with us. And I think it's also important to note that they've given us more in terms of the local government settlement than what the Barnet consequentials were. So really clear steer from Welsh Government that they're investing in local government as we are a delivery arm for their programme for government and public services. But the report's really clear that despite all of that, actually there's real pressures building up in the local government system. And despite a good settlement, it's still a challenging time for local government in terms of public service delivery. So there's no milk and honey with this. I listened to the leader of the opposition's comments. The settlement isn't going to solve all our ills. We need to deal with the pressures that are in the system and fundamentally reshape the way that we deliver services to meet those challenges. I think this report clearly sets that out. And in terms of the council tax settlement, the former deputy leader of the council will know that it's important to protect the council tax base so that we can continue to deliver public services. It's what he, reminded us of when he was in cabinet. We will face those difficult decisions. I'm sure that he faced those difficult decisions as well. But the priority has to be for us as a council to deliver services that protect the vulnerable in our communities. And I hope that we can all agree on that. But just wanted to put that on the record and reiterate my thanks for what is a really comprehensive report. Thank you.
I've got Pete Roberts waiting.
Yeah, I've got two questions on two different issues. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the challenges facing the Fire and Rescue Service. Their decision and their request on the levy, I think, is pretty much unprecedented in anyone's experience, and that will have significant impacts on our budget because it is a levy that we are obliged to pay. So what I'd like to know, because this doesn't, unlike the police, this doesn't show us a line in the council tax bills that come to the public, it shows up buried within our budget. What is the range we are expecting to see in terms of the costs we will be picking up, and what does that equate to if we were to pass that on entirely to the council taxpayer in terms of a council tax increase? Obviously we will embed some of that within our budget, and also some of that will come from the Welsh Government grant, so we won't pick up the full element of the 13%, possibly higher, that will be required. So that's my first question. And then my second question relates to our energy costs. There has been an energy price cap that some authorities have benefited from in the current financial year. My understanding is we haven't benefited much from that because of the contracts we already hold. But obviously there has been a political decision taken within Westminster not to extend that into the next financial year. We saw in the paper that came to us around the Freedom Leisure issue that they've identified up to, or possibly even over, £1 million of extra energy costs because that is not being extended. So I wonder if you've got any ideas what the impact would have been in terms of energy price rises had that cap been extended into the next financial year.
Okay, two technical questions there. Jane, are you able to answer?
I can do. With regard to the fire levy, The percentage increase that we had initially last week was the 13% increase in that levy cost. For us, that would be about £1 million additional. And that, when you consider council tax increase of 1%, is around 900,000. So it exceeds a 1% increase in council tax if we were to see it in that way. Now, with the additional grant transfers, that levy could go up to as much as 17%. Now, we would hope that part of the additional transfer would meet the majority of that, but we have yet to see how that plays out in terms of the settlement and how the allocation comes through to us on what basis, as opposed to the way that the levy is charged, which is against population. So there may be a mismatch there, but we will have to wait until we have further information there with regard to that. So that's what we're looking in terms of the fire levy. In terms of the energy costs, I haven't done the calculation in terms of what it might look like with that extra support. We've been too involved at the moment costing up what we do know rather than that. So I can't give you that picture at the moment, but obviously not having any support, clearly those costs are significant to the council, but we can look at that as we develop the budget proposal for you.
Thank you, Jane. I think that's very important, particularly for the school's delegated budget, where the costs on energies are potentially creating a huge pressure on individual school budgets. It would be useful to actually understand what they would have looked like had that support been extended.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more contributions from the floor? Please wave or shout. As I say, I can't see hands. No? David, would you like to sum up and put the recommendations to us, please? David Thomas?
Yes, I'll do that now, Leader. I just to say that the Minister actually stated in the Welsh Government report that despite the improved settlement for local authorities, that significant challenges still remained. So, as has rightly been said, we're nowhere near out of the woods yet. But anyway, the recommendations are that Cabinet consider and approve the revised assumptions and the approach outlined in compiling the revised medium-term financial strategy and updated financial model. That Cabinet note the initial information on the provisional settlement for local government and the allocation for powers. That officers update the medium-term financial strategy and budget plan in light of the provisional settlement for further consideration by Cabinet over the coming weeks before finalising the budget proposal in January 2023. Thank you, Leader.
Okay. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Pete Roberts, seconded, please. Thank you. Could I please have a show of hands, those in support of the recommendations? Good. Thank you very much. That's carried. So we move on. Now we have some supplementary items to deal with. One of them is the quarter two performance report, which is, I think, should be in my name as leader. Have all members got the Clive?
Sorry, Leader. Apologies for interrupting. Can I rectify a serious omission from the reference on the RIPA report, which is at number 7 on the agenda? Members and leader, I failed to acknowledge and thank Helen Dolman for the hard work that she put in preparing the revised RIPA policy and dealing with the action plan. And I'm sorry I failed to acknowledge that earlier on, and I thank you for the opportunity of rectifying that omission.
My pleasure, and I'm sorry you did ask me before and I forgot to ask you to come back in. My apologies for that, and I'm sure that your comments reflect all members' feelings. Clearly a good piece of work, and Helen's done excellently there. So many thanks, Helen. So if we move on to the quarter two performance report, which can I assume all members have this in front of them? Yes, it came as supplementary. Yeah, thank you. It's in my name. takes a bit of time to load if you try and load it. It's still loading on mine at the moment. But thank you. Right. So.
Leader, would it be helpful if I came in?
By all means, Catherine James was. Is she with us as well, Emma?
No, not this morning. But
Okay,
I'm
no
happy to take
problem.
you through this if helpful.
It would be helpful. I just wanted to highlight. I mean, you know, it's a lengthy report. Members may wish to concentrate on items that have been identified as red, which of course they're entitled to do. But there are significant other areas of performance where we be, you know, are still, if they're not red, are offering a source of concern. So I'm very happy to deal with those as well. But if Emma, if you'd like to come in and give us a resume of this lengthy report, which isn't necessarily the easiest to follow if you're not used to it. So thank you, Emma.
Okay. So the report presented outlines how we performed as an organisation in Q2 in delivery of our objectives and measures that make up the current Corporate Improvement Plan Vision 2025. And the report has been delayed due to the services requiring time to focus upon pressures such as the budget situation and the immediate cost of living crisis. It's important to note that whilst we were working on the new corporate plan in a cross-cutting party way based upon the progressive partnership, that this will not be enacted until April 2023. So we need to ensure oversight against the current plan set by the previous administration of Vision 2025. Firstly, when considering the information in front of you, it is important to note that the wider context and challenging circumstances we operate in as the organisation continues to recover from COVID-19 pandemic and grapples with increased cost of living crisis, the impacts of Brexit and the effects of the war in Ukraine. There is an interactive Power BI dashboard embedded within the report where members can view information relating to measures and objectives, considering the themes and also the strategic equality plan themes, service areas and the RAG statuses that the leader referred to. So of the objectives within the corporate improvement plan, the breakdown of area performance against objective is 35 of 52 or 64% are on track to be delivered, a slight reduction from 69% in Q1, with 5% not reported and the remainder off track. Of the related performance measures, 42 of 65 so 65% are on track, with 25% not reported and the remainder being off track to some extent. Whilst it's not an exhaustive list, I've just drawn out some information against the existing wellbeing objectives. So under the economy, the affordable housing programme is slightly off track. New developments are challenged by phosphates, planning days, finance and grant availability. The Mid Wales growth deal continues to grow at pace, with all strategic outline cases being reviewed over the last quarter and findings presented to the board back in September. All 7 projects have been notified of the outcome of progressing to outline business case. The team are working on 1 for resubmission. And during the quarter, 7 people have entered employment as a direct result of the Communities for Work Plus project. For health and care, it's important that these be considered amongst the backdrop of increased pressure widely known within the health and care organisations. However, during the quarter, there was a care inspectorate Wales, a CIW improvement check, which identified good progress and had been made in adults and children's social care. Work is ongoing building the extra care sites in Welshpool and Estrogynlais. Plans are developed for Brecon. The site has been purchased by a housing association who will liaison with the council for future requirements, and are in the process of submitting relevant planning applications to the national parks. It's anticipated that the plan will be secured within the financial year, with work on site to commence in 23-24. Discussions have also been held with 2 potential providers in Machynlleth. North Powys Wellbeing Programme is slightly delayed, with the campus opening delayed due to the current timeline, largely due to ongoing capacity issues. Despite the pressures being faced in social care, there have been areas of achievement, particularly supporting our most vulnerable, with 98% of children prevention service work around the family breakdown remaining with their families, an increase in the number of individuals using direct payments as their care package of choice, which remains at one of the highest in Wales. However, we do also need to consider the stark reality of the situation we're working in. As the pressures outlined earlier have had a significant impact upon our most vulnerable people. There's been an increase in the number of presentations of homelessness people, an increase of those in temporary accommodation. The issue of supporting those in need with the right accommodation types is also highlighted by the National Commission Landscape within Children's Services, who have identified issues surrounding the availability of placements for young people as a key challenge. So learning and skills, the Transform Education programme continues to move forward. Ysgol Caerhenion opened in September 22. There's been a lot of activity related to the schools within Powys as outlined in the report itself. Virtual school has been launched this term to support children looked after. The new Ysgol Penmaes satellite provision based at Crossgates Primary School officially opened. The provision largely benefits learners with complex living needs, living close to the Llandrindod Wells area. And a child poverty task force was launched at the Royal Welsh Summer Show, which will provide further updates in our ongoing reporting. But we do recognise there's still work to be done, such as increasing the number of apprenticeships and attracting applicants to work within Powys. And we'll continue to do that work under our recruitment and retention task and finish group. Residents and communities, a further 5 electric vehicle charging points have become available in the council car parks in July. A new 3G pitch at Llanbathlin Sports Centre was installed. Replacement LDP is in local development plan is in progress, a framework to assess potential development sites. Physical visits to libraries, museums and archives were increasing but had not yet reached the pre-pandemic levels. And then looking at our making it happen, so Digital Powys continues to deliver and support the organisation with improving digital opportunities, creating an accessibility hub. We've got information, advice and guidance for staff. We've also set up our developed a combined on and off-grid winter fuel payment application and complex eligibility check-in process that's automated for rejection, approval, payment processes and a number of other areas. We've completed our first corporate self-assessment and received positive feedback from Welsh Government and the Welsh Local Government Association. But it's important to note that we do have workforce challenges, significant workforce challenges actually, such as the need to increase the organisational compliance with mandatory training and appraisals, the recruitment and retention challenges and the sickness. We continue to face challenges surrounding Welsh language and are below where we would like to be, encouraging the use of Welsh language from staff and in terms of its uptake for the people of Powys. However, actions have been identified as and noted in the main report to help us improve this. And our integrated business plan continues to be embedded. We have removed that from our transformation programme as it moves into business as usual. And then finally, at the end of the report, you can see that we've undertaken some engagement with people of Powys, with 1,708 people using their views to inform future decision making, 21% of these speaking positively about the council, and outlining the activities presented within the report and demonstrates how we can hopefully continue to build this relationship and be increasingly open to hearing the voice of the people of Powys. We've also launched the draft public participation strategy, which details how people can get involved and our approach to engagement. So to conclude, the report evidences a vast amount of work undertaken by the council in the last 3 months of Q2, which is from June to September, and details some of the challenges faced. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Emma. Again, a marathon for you as well. And thank you very much for taking us through that. Obviously, from my perspective as the portfolio holder, relevant portfolio holder, quite a lot of this is it's Q2 and we're now way into Q3. And some of it is just historic, and as Emma pointed out, situations change remarkably fast at the moment. We've gone the escalation of problems in the health service and social care has been very rapid in recent weeks and months, and so it'd be interesting to see what Q3 has to say when it comes through. Can we have an indication, Emma, when we would normally expect to receive Q3 performance report?
Yeah, so Q3 takes us up to the end of December, and ordinarily we would try and produce our performance report within a month of the end of the quarter.
So yeah, so towards the end of January at the latest. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Members, the floor's open. Questions, please. Are there any? Matthew, thank you very much.
Jake is before me.
My apologies.
Sorry.
No, my apologies, Jake.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a point, really, that obviously the note is the report is there for noting. I've been through it now a couple of times in detail at various stages of the production of the report, and gone through detailed conversations regarding performance with officers as the report has been put together. And I think it's a very fine report. Obviously, in some areas it's not all we'd want to be, and that's our role to keep observing, to keep challenging, to keep having constructive conversations with officers to drive improved performance. And all I was going to say is, if there are any questions which arise out of the report, not necessarily now, but in relation to my portfolio, I'm happy to engage with any member to pick those up and to discuss them. So as an acceptance of the report and an offer of ongoing engagement.
Thank you very much. And Matthew Dorrance, please.
Thanks, Leader. Just wanted to touch on a couple of points within the report, if I can, things that I guess are pertinent to my portfolio. Despite the challenging backdrop that we're operating against, there have been some successes. 61 new council house completions, acquisition of 7 new developer built homes, and planning for 56 new council homes secured and progressing. I just want to note that those 61 new council house completions are because of the decisions taken in the previous council by our previous administration, and I'm grateful to them for doing that, because that's helping relieve the real pressure that we've got in the housing system right now. That was the right decision to make, and our commitment to continuing with building new council homes as they began is really important. But despite that, there are some real challenges around housing, and that good performance in terms of getting new homes built and acquiring them still is not enough in terms of meeting the demand that we've got. And there's been some chat in the discussion in the chat box around homelessness, and rightly so. But homelessness presentations are continuing to increase, and that's noted in the performance report as well. In fact, it's grown since this report was published, and we've now got around 60 households in bed and breakfast, so we clearly need to do more for that. There is really the main reason for homelessness presentations within the county is loss of rented or tied accommodation, and I am hopeful that the new legislation that came into force just a few weeks ago will help tackle some of those issues. But back to good performance, I was really pleased to see that we've been able to reduce the void time on properties. That's the time that a council house is empty between one tenant vacating and another tenant moving in. We've cut that void time by 50 days, which is a significant improvement since we insourced the service that was previously held by Heart of Wales Property Services. I am confident that we are able to drive that time down further, and the service is absolutely focused on trying to do that so that we can maximise rental income and help provide the homes that people in Powys need. So that's a really positive thing for the council. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And it's good to hear those observations. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Pete Roberts, please. You're on mute, Pete.
I'm going to echo Matthew's thanks to my predecessor. There are a lot of the building projects that you can see in this that were started under the previous administration, which are now beginning to make progress. But the one thing that I would highlight particularly, which is a cross-departmental initiative, and that's the establishment of the virtual school for children looked after. This has been a significant enterprise undertaken by officers. It's pulled together lots of paperwork and lots of administration and created a focus so that all of the children within the children looked after category, wherever they are within our education system, are being monitored and being cared for from a central location, so that we are aware of their progress and we can provide the support that they need. And that is something that as corporate parents we should commend, and I would very much draw the attention of everyone to the hard work that officers and my predecessor put in to make that happen.
Thank you. It's very helpful. Right. We are to receive this report. Oh, somebody wanted to speak. Sorry. Oh, Sandra, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Jade.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to reiterate what other members have already said regarding our predecessors. A lot of hard work has gone into ensuring that our young children are cared for effectively and efficiently. Many improvements have been made and we are seeing the fruits of that now. We are growing our own as far as social service workers are concerned. We are in a national crisis regarding shortage of social workers throughout the nation, as we are aware. So it's very, very difficult. But the seeds that we've got for growing our own are effective and are coming into fruition, and hopefully we can grow on that even more. I support what Councillor Peters said regarding our looked after children and the virtual school, and that's very commendable. There are many other things that have been put into place. For example, some of the homes that we've got that are in our county now, instead of sending our youngsters out of county to be in placements, which is far more costly and not any good for our youngsters. They need to be home. They need to be in our county, near their families, near their friends, near their peers, etc. So there's a lot of hard work that has gone on in the past. It is being built on and it is growing. And I'd like to thank individuals who have put all that into place previous to us coming into our cabinet positions. That now we can't take all the credit for what others have set, for us. But that good work is being promoted and continuing. Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you. Okay. Members, Clive, can you guide me? We just need to receive this report. Do we need to vote?
No vote. The recommendations are in paragraph 9 of the report. The Cabinet notes the contents of the report, which presents an overview of performance for the quarter against objectives and measures published in Vision 2025. And Cabinet notes that the report is retrospective and may not reflect the context of the emerging financial challenges that the Council is facing.
Thank you. Okay, so we duly note it. And thank you very much, one and all, for your contributions, and thank you, Emma, for the presentation. I don't think, other than the forward work programme, is there any other supplementary item that I've missed? Clive, are we?
That's everything covered, Leader.
It's all covered. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. So just the only item left on the agenda not dealt with is item 9, forward work programme, which is for information on pages 217 and 218 for members. Other than that, I have no other business. And I can now, I think, safely declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, one and all. And thank you for those not on the Cabinet attending as well, for your contributions. Welcome back.